Come, Nerevar, friend or traitor, come. Come and look upon the heart and a Kulakan.
RPGs are full of memorable characters, ones that the player interacts with that have engaged in many conversations and battles throughout many adventures across many titles. But rarely is it that the player builds an interest in the protagonist. RPG protagonists have a long history of being bland and one note, whether they're from the East or the West. And the main reason for that is pretty simple. The characters are supposed to be you. Yes, I'm calling you bland and boring. These characters are meant to be vessels for the player so that they can fill the role themselves. Early RPGs are full of this, and the games reflect this, and sometimes they will allow the player to customize how your character can look. And even when they don't allow for full customization, they will usually just have a character be mostly silent, with the exception of grunts or battle tactics.
Persona!
But when it came to dialogue, the only voice that could be heard from the protagonist was our own. And the reaction of the NPCs was felt in the immersion through these games provided. But as time went on, games began to evolve, and gaming as a whole was starting to become more relevant to the average person. So, it was then that developers started to give the protagonist a little bit more character beyond just being a husk for the players to inhabit. Now, while there were games that did it before, one game in particular popularized the concept and introduced a new, fully voiced protagonist. Mass Effect introduced us to a character that was able to be controlled by the player and yet was still developed enough to have their own personality. It was a move that paid off, as now players were able to see the conversation between two people, as opposed to the reaction of their dialogue options. And in the case of Commander Shepard, it worked because despite being able to customize how your Shepard can look, this game is not meant to be about who you are, it's about who your Shepard is, and how they will save the galaxy. This allowed devs to create more spectacle-based stories, and by restricting the player to a specific character, it allows for RPGs to grow more engaging in the conversation aspect and exciting in the combat aspect, creating a blend of ARPGs like Diablo and CRPGs like Baldur's Gate. The dialogue wheel was also a new and innovative concept for the genre as well, simplifying conversation choices and maintaining a tone of conversation rather than the words themselves. Now, this did hold contention for some players, as there were times where the options were misleading, and Shepard would say something unexpected, but it worked with the tone that the game was going for. And it was a bold but impressive move that paid off, and Mass Effect became a big hit because of it, coming out with a sequel that generated even more fans. And this would be the title that would get other devs to take inspiration. And unfortunately, they took a little too much inspiration. BioWare followed up a game where the player could pick from multiple classes, races, and origin stories, and made it into a lesser fantasy clone of Mass Effect that restricts player freedom. Ubisoft took a series that was running out of ideas with the narrative, and decided to have it cosplay as an RPG with a dialogue wheel that makes no difference regardless of what you choose. Horizon tries its best to make its world stand out, but fails to differentiate its characters due to the bland conversations. Vampire the Masquerade, a game that was known for having a plethora of dialogue options and multiple routes with quest lines, is now shown to have less variety than its predecessor, removing any hope and hype I had for this game. These are the issues that have popped up constantly with modern RPGs for years now, and has caused an uproar from fans that want to go back to the old days of less restrictions. But no game was affected harder from this issue than Fallout 4. Fallout 4 is a fun game, but it's a bad RPG. This has been said so many times. It's one of the most popular phrases that you'll see, and a lot of other YouTube dipshits have said this on this site as well. But recently, it has had a huge resurgence thanks to the Fallout show that has come out on Amazon. All of the games have had a huge increase in players, and most of all Fallout 4. And honestly, I'm really happy about it. I love these games. They're my favorite series of all time. I have a Vault-Tec tattoo on my wrist, and I have enjoyed every game in the franchise. Except this one. because I still haven't played it. But I have been getting back into Fallout rabbit hole, playing all the games from 1 to 4, and they have been a very enjoyable experience overall. 4 has been a ton of fun to go back to. The world is engaging and the combat flows well compared to the previous titles, and the gun customization is one of my favorite things about it. There is so much to improve and tinker with. And I gotta say, even the story has honestly gotten better over time with me as well. I really like how the Brotherhood is in this game, and Elder Maxon has grown on me as a character recently. This might be because I'm more into Warhammer, but it's really engaging to see this zealous group of hoarders with this much power, but still decent enough intentions. But one thing I still don't like in this game, and that's who I'm playing as. Nate, Nora, Soul Survivor, whatever the fuck you want to call him,
Mr. Fuckface,
is to this day the most conflicting player character in the whole series. Before this, the only real thing that was known about the player character in Fallout was their role. They were the Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, the Lone Wanderer, and the Courier. All of these characters were open to interpretation and allowed the player to fill in the dots with their actions. But the Soul Survivor weren't like that. No matter what, you are playing a veteran or a lawyer that was alive before the war, and you took shelter in a vault to be cryogenically frozen and wake up 200 years later to find your missing son in a radiated wasteland. Now, on paper, this is actually a really cool idea. It follows what the main quests of the games have always been about. The main protagonist in every game is always chasing after some sort of MacGuffin, whether it's an object, a person, or a bit of both. And this is still a great opportunity for the game because this allows just as much flexibility, because just the idea of your character being pre-war and cryogenically frozen, that means you can be anyone. But you're not. You're restricted to this character and you have a connection to your son whether you want to or not. Well, surely that means you'll stop at nothing to save him, right?
peddling poison to kids, are we? Today, you face the Silver Shroud!
Yeah, this shit got memed to hell when the game came out, but what's also annoying is that despite the effort Bethesda went through to differentiate the two playable characters, they really aren't that different from each other. Whoever you don't choose gets domed in the head, and then they are promptly left behind. Other games have tried this similar method with the protagonist to make them stand out. Instead of making them a male and a female character to be different versions of the same character, they make them two different characters. They did this in Mass Effect Andromeda, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Genshin Impact. And it's a cool idea in theory, but every time it becomes pointless. Because in all of these games, the other character just fucks off out of the story and plays little to no part. And the Soul Survivor suffered not only from that, but also from a lack of real choice in the dialogue and personality. It's really hard to play this game as anything that's not a lost and depressed widower, but I would forgive all that if they at least committed and made it work in the gameplay as well. But this is still a Fallout game, so you set your special, and with the exception of the opening monologue, you're still expected to fill in the blanks for yourself as a character that is already established, and it doesn't work as well as other games. Elder Scrolls games start your character with nothing. You're a prisoner, and that allows you to easily get into the shoes of them. Deus Ex, right off the bat, tells you that you are JC Denton, and you are not going to be playing as anyone else other than JC Denton. Baldur's Gate 3 gives you the option to play as one of 7 origin characters, or to play your own character and just join in. And that sucks because I feel like there was a missed opportunity to implement something like that into Fallout 4. But instead, we're left with these two characters that have different professions, but yet have identical personalities and dialogue. And hell, having the preset characters of Nate and Nora would have been fine. It could have expanded on the game a lot more, if they were optional characters. The original Fallout game had this as well. When you first start the game, it gives you the option to play as one of 3 preset characters that all have their own perks, traits, and special. But you still had the choice to start from scratch and make your own character. And I feel like Fallout 4 could have done something with this. I feel like they could have done something like Baldur's Gate 3 where they give you the option to play as an origin character and you have unique scenes and dialogue because of it. This would have given the characters and the game much more variety in the choices, and it would have went a long way into making them stand out as separate people, because as they stand now, they don't. And this issue gets bigger as we move on later into the game as you interact with other characters. The issue that has been brought up incredibly often is the issue of a voice protagonist. Now, that's not to say that the voice acting is bad. Far from it. Brian T. Delaney and Courtney Taylor do fantastic jobs with the delivery. You can feel the desperation from their voices in the beginning of the game.
Come on. There has to be a release. Oh, God. Why would Vault-Tec do this?
And the sarcastic options are genuinely funny.
Me? No, I'm from the moon. Still got cheese in my shoes.
The dialogue honestly fit the vibe of the outlandish lines that previous protagonists have been able to say, and it's pretty hilarious to hear someone say them. But the problems come when you realize that every conversation revolves around the same 4 options no matter what, and the voice shows more restriction to the game as a whole because now the game has to account for what the main character is able to say in response, and it causes NPCs to only have limited responses. Now, naturally, there will always be restrictions to keep a story going. I understand that, for any game. Even RPGs that let you do what you want. But if you're going to put me on a character like this, you might as well give me a little bit more to work with here so I can relate to them. Other than the monologue at the beginning of the game, we don't really get that much to connect or relate with our character and their family because we gotta keep moving along to get to the main game. And if you want to play a female character, you don't even get the fucking monologue, but you still just keep chugging away like nothing even happened. But if that's the case, why did Bethesda insist on making Nora a lawyer? If you're gonna have the characters be so similar to each other, why not just have them both be veterans? Would have made more sense in the long run so you could avoid the dipshits online who complain about how it makes no sense for a lawyer to get into power armor at the beginning of the game. What? And yeah, I get it, people have complained before about how Bethesda openings are long, but having a little bit more time with the family to show them spending time in the vault before getting frozen would have gone a long way to create at least a little bit of care from the player. But we don't get that. We just get thrown into the world, and when we do, it does have a passable start if you choose to play up how your character would act. They express desperation and confusion to wanting to find their son and struggle to understand what the hell just happened for the past 200 years. Now, I have less problem with the voice, I have more problem with the believability. Because when I'm saving settlements, conducting an investigation with a robot detective, or helping my new Irish girlfriend kick her chem habit, I understand why I'm doing it, because I want to do it. I want to level up, I want to get the companion perks, I want to get the unique weapons, I want to explore new areas. But the question I have in my mind is, would my character do this? Would someone want to go through the trouble of establishing settlements for a faction that fell onto their lap? Would they dress up as a superhero and murder a bunch of people? Would they spend just as much, if not more time investigating and helping someone try to find their missing daughter than their own fucking kid? And that's when I realized that this character just doesn't work. They play in the middle too much. They are by far the most bizarre case for a player character in an RPG. And yeah, you could make the same argument for the Lone Wanderer in Fallout 3, as they are established in the opening as well as being the kid of Liam Neeson and the whole water purification thing. But here at least, our character is young, and this is their first exposure to the world outside of the vault. So you could still fill in the blanks of who your character will be, and how the wasteland shapes them. The sole survivor, by comparison, is too much in the middle. He's too established for the player to fill in the blanks, but he's not established enough to be relatable to the player. And despite having 2 separate career paths for each of the characters, they are essentially the same person. But then I was thinking, there was another game that came out in 2007 alongside Mass Effect, and it also had a voice protagonist with their own backstory and motivation. A game that was fairly underwhelming in sales, but did well enough to get a cult following, and eventually 2 sequels that would be received exceptionally well. The Witcher was a series that introduced players into the dark fantasy world of the popular Polish book series with the same name, and like Mass Effect, it was introduced with a character that was already set in stone. but to an even greater extent than Shepard was. In all the Witcher games, you play as Geralt. Every decision and action that you made in the game was Geralt's choice. You see his motivations, his desires, his relationships, his drama, all of it was seen through his eyes. And while it did take the third game to really get people into the franchise, this concept worked, because players knew right from the get-go who they were playing as. And the games do a superb job at making Geralt a likable and relatable character, especially in the world that he lives in. And Geralt's journey was an unforgettable one, rich with iconic characters and moments that forever live on in the hearts of the players. But when CDPR moved on to introduce Mike Pondsmith's world of Cyberpunk 2077, they did things slightly differently. They made a protagonist that, in my opinion, is the perfect blend of a vessel and an established character. Cyberpunk introduces V in one of three ways: as a street kid punk with an attitude, a nomad without a home, or a corpo rat who loses everything. And every intro is crafted in a way that introduces the world and the character in a unique way, that gets you invested. Every intro starts you in front of a mirror, showing off your V and then immediately thrusting you into the world. The Nomad intro takes its time to build on the scale of the world, allowing you to drive to Night City from the vast desert. The Street Kid intro has you hopping fences and walking down dirty streets, experiencing Night City close up, and having a close encounter with the gangs that reside in it. And the Corpo path has you working half to death in a megaton building, and it has you taking off, flying in an AV, watching civilians walk by like ants. Each intro has a unique and detailed way to introduce the character of V and the metropolis of Night City. They each are different, but build on the general themes of the game. Many people complained before about the fact that they all lead to the same outcome of meeting Jackie and moving in with him in the same apartment. And while that is true, they also allow for new context for how you meet Jackie. Dragon Age Origins did something similar with their intro as well, with how the player character meets Duncan. And this works in a similar way. We are able to build a connection to V through the life paths we choose, and we can see their struggles close up and face them early on in each life path. And this is felt later down the line with the unique dialogue that shows up with conversations. The immediate thing that this game does better is that there is no favoritism with either of the genders you pick. You pick V's life path and then their gender, and they work regardless of what you choose. So in this sense, it allows players to choose the gender they want without being told that they are picking the wrong version of the character. But the life paths and intros also leave a lot for interpretation as well, as just enough is established about V to make them relatable, and if the player wants, they can build more on the character in their own headcanons as well. Now granted, when it comes to the promotion of the game, especially recently, there is a lot more love for female V than male V, with her being on the cover of the special edition and the most recent game trailers showing her more often without any sight of male V. However, male V has been shown quite a bit when the game was initially coming out, and has still been seen in official art of the game. But also, they managed to both have variety in the dialogue and conversations. And I'm not just talking about the voice acting or romance options. NPCs will have slightly different conversations depending on the gender and life path you choose. And you also have the option to choose the life path dialogue to respond to someone. But it's not just the life paths that give you varying options, but also the stats of your character's abilities as well. If you have enough cool, you can smooth talk your way out of a conflict. Or if you have enough reflex, you can disarm someone's gun from their hands. And while some of these conversations may loop back to a similar or even the same result, it shows that the game is accounting for what your V is like, by allowing them to show knowledge in the stats you have spec'd them into, with both the combat and the conversations. And because V is an open enough character to reflect that, that allows them to have more personal connection to the player, and they still have a say on what they are like when they interact with people. And this is amplified with how the dialogue works in this game compared to Fallout 4, where you always have 4 options. Speaking of which, let's talk about the conversations in both of these games. So the dialogue wheel in Fallout 4 fucking sucks. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It fucking sucks. And I'm not even going to talk about the lack of choice, or the 4 yes meme that people always bring up. Mainly the fundamental standpoint, it fucking sucks. because there is little to no indication on whether the dialogue will progress the conversation further or if it will just be an investigation option. And it also doesn't help that they shorten the phrases so much that it's almost impossible to determine what your character will say. It's worse than how it is in Mass Effect, and you probably noticed from the footage, I am using a mod that changes this, which is just a staple of Bethesda games, isn't it? Getting mods that fix issues in the game. Hell, I had to do this for the fucking settlement builder. The settlement build... It's okay, off topic. The settlement building in this fucking game, I wanted to tear my fucking hair out, dude. Like, I wanted to make a cool little base around Red Rocket, and I just wanted to build a fucking wall, and I was doing it without mods, and oh my god, it's awful. It's so fucking awful. But this dialogue system also lacks in variety from what was available in other games, and there is no way to have a reflection on what your character is like, and what their speciality is. The only stat that ends up making a difference is charisma, because it allows you to press the colored dialogue to get more money, or have a character reveal some secret to you. It also doesn't help that most of the dialogue just goes on to progress the same thing. It's just slightly different tones depending on which option you choose. There's a reason why most people on subsequent playthroughs just spam the sarcastic option, because at least then, your character will say something funny. In Cyberpunk, the tone of conversations feels way more interactive, and even when the plot does move along the same way, there's at least a new context for how V achieves it. V may be a predetermined character within the story, but they can still reflect on what the player wants them to be, and how they act with their friends and enemies. And this goes further with the romance options in these games. Romance options are a mainstay in a lot of RPGs. They have become a very appealing concept, and for good reason. Being able to engage in a romantic relationship with a companion can be a great way to immerse the player into the world and have them connect with the character on a greater level. Now, that being said, they have always had their share of problems. Sometimes they can feel very samey. Not due to the scenes or conversations themselves, but with how they work. For the longest time, romance options would always revolve around the player character talking to partner character, and after you do it enough times or complete a personal quest for them, character tells player that they are interested in them, to which the player confirms or denies, and then the relationship is formed. And this goes into a scene with the characters hugging, kissing, or full-on banging. And every game does romance options in different ways. For example, in JRPGs like Persona 5, you can establish a relationship pretty early on into the game, and you can even do it with multiple people, but there's consequences to that. Whereas with Fire Emblem, the S ranks, as they call it, are saved at the very end, and are shown as an epilogue for your character and their romantic partner. The important thing is that the romance should build on the character in a way that makes sense, and add something to either the narrative or the gameplay. Because if it doesn't, there's really no reason for it to be in the game. And in this case, Cyberpunk has romances that, to me, are some of the best I've ever seen. And Fallout 4 has ones that add nothing to the companions or the player character. Well, I mean, I guess you could say Fallout 4 has a gameplay mechanic. I mean, you get an extra XP bonus whenever you sleep near them. But that doesn't change the fact that my character literally woke up not long ago and watched his wife die. Man, he gets over that shit pretty quick. But compare this to V, where the relationships between all the characters you're able to romance, not you, work in very compelling and engaging ways that connect with both V and the character that they are interested in, and adding to the overall story. Let's do a quick comparison. We're going to look at two scenes. The final romance conversation between the sole survivor and Kate, and the final romance conversation with V and Panam.
Did you know I spent 3 years fighting at the combat zone? 3 years of getting beaten to hell by a bunch of losers and lunatics. After the matches were over, I'd spit out the blood, stitch me wounds, and do a couple of shots of Psycho to keep me going. I fucking hated it. I hated the crowds, I hated the other fighters, and I hated myself. I never understood why I put myself through all that. Until now. It was because I was alone. And I think deep down, I wanted to die. I wanted one of my opponents to crush the life out of me, the easy way out.
Well, that's the past. You're not alone anymore.
Then maybe you know what I'm trying to say to you.
V, You have to tell me what is happening. The blood. You were out for hours. What's wrong?
Panam, It's getting worse. Every single day.
Okay, V, relax. Take it bit by bit. What is happening? Exactly.
To tell you the whole truth, I'm afraid things won't be the same between us if I do.
V, listen to me. There is not a thing you could say to me that would change how... I mean, just cut the bullshit and tell me what's going on.
My life's been nothing but one huge failure after another. You've heard all my stories, and you know the prices I've paid. There were a few times when things got really bad that I found myself staring down the barrel of my own shotgun. I don't know why I didn't pull the trigger. I guess I was praying that I could find a single decent scrap of humanity in this fucked up world. And then, what you did for me back there at Vault 95, it was like the answer to those prayers. That's the first time in me life I've fully depended on someone else, and they didn't let me down. God damn it, I'm making a mess of this.
You're not messing anything up. You're doing just fine.
I'm trying to hold it together. Maybe I should just get to the point.
You ever hear of the relic?
The Arasaka tech? Does something with personalities? I saw the ads. Sounds like some rich people scam, to be honest.
It's not bullshit. I've got a biochip in my head with one of those constructs. And the chip's damaged.
So take it out!
Definitely not that simple. Relics also keep me alive, but...
So this is cyberpsychosis? Because if it is, I know people who...
No. The chip's data is affecting my neural connections. Got nothing to do with cyberpsychosis. I remove the relic, I die. If I don't deal with the construct, I die.
Fuck.
Just trying to live with it. Survive, actually.
The longer we've been spending time together, the more I'm beginning to realize what you mean to me. And I'm not just talking about you watching me back or sharing a drink together. I mean more than that. Before we met, I'd never let me guard down around anyone. I didn't dare. But with you, I feel like I can let you in and see me for everything that I am. For better or for worse. Look, I can't go back to the way things were before we met. I won't. But what I need you to do is look me in the eyes and tell me you feel something too.
Of course I do. I'm in love with you, Kate.
You're what? You said you're in love with me. I didn't know. I mean, I felt something between us, but I thought it was something else. Why? Why would you fall in love with someone as screwed up as I am?
Because you're special to me, Kate. And I don't think I'd be happier with anyone else.
You really mean that? This has to be the first time I put all my cards on the table and didn't end up losing everything. You don't know how much this means to me, to have someone special in my life.
V, back to what we were saying. I will not even pretend to understand. I don't think it has even sunk in yet. But I am serious. How can I help?
Honestly, not a clue.
But there has to be something. Someone who can...
Remember Hellman? He's the one who created the personality construct tech.
That's why you wanted to get him.
But it was a dead end. Now I have to figure out where to go next.
You'll find a way. And once you do, let me know. I will help. This whole family will help. Saul was not joking. You understand?
Thanks for everything. For being here for me.
Take care of yourself. And let me know. Well, just please keep in touch.
So, obviously, Cyberpunk has the advantage of having better choreography and animations that sell the scene. But the dialogue is also vastly superior as well, because in the Kate scene, This is just someone trauma dumping to another person that has very short-term responses, and that eventually leads to the sole survivor just confessing love, and sure, there's a shock to the voice of Kate when she hears this, but it's shown as a bonus, rather than a gradual increase in the emotions of the characters, as conversations prior are the same type of backstory exposition on the companions, with the occasional flirt option that appears. When it comes to V and Panam, throughout the questlines they are talking about their relationship, and the dialogue reflects the struggles that both of them have with their past, and they're slowly able to open up with each other. It's a give and take with both characters rather than just one character unpacking to a voice box. Fans have grown attached to the characters of Cyberpunk much more, and they have stayed with them even after 4 years because of their writing and personalities, but also because their interactions with each other. Now, that's not to say that Cyberpunk is perfect with the romances. There is clearly favoritism with the female romance options. You meet Judy and Panam in main quests, and both of them learn about V's condition with Johnny, whereas River is met in a side quest as missable, and he doesn't even learn about Johnny, and then Carrie does know about Johnny, but he's very late into the game. But even with that being said, it is more believable with V because their character is written to have flexibility and is open to getting into a romantic relationship, despite the hard road they walk on. But the final thing that makes V work is their stake in the story. Regardless of any complaints that players may have had with the game or the story of Cyberpunk, V is needed to tell the story that Cyberpunk 2077 wants to tell. All of the life paths give V some sort of connection to Arasaka, and they in turn also have a connection with Johnny and the other cast of characters that they meet along the way, because of the heist and the relic that is slowly destroying their brain, and this is what pushes them to meet characters like Takamura. This is also true with Johnny and the conflict between him and V, the growing rivalry that eventually can turn into a friendship between the two of them. Even the DLCs find a way to give V a connection, with Somi contacting them with the promise to give them a cure to the relic, and connecting them to this government espionage in an engaging way that works with the narrative in a way that makes sense. And because V exists in a way that is both established by the narrative and formed by the player, they can thrive in a way that enhances the story and their character without sacrificing player choice. Compare that to the Sole Survivor, where if you were to remove their connection to Sean and replace them with a blank slate character, the story really wouldn't change that much. It would only really require a few reworkings to have it make sense, but essentially it would just be a random character waking up in a new wasteland region that has multiple factions fighting for control over it, and you just have to pick a side for which one controls the Commonwealth. And that's pretty similar to what New Vegas was about. They managed to make it work with the main character just being a fucking mailman. Hell, some mods even do exactly that. Make your character into a self-insert, and even change up the NPC dialogue to fit it. It would have solved a lot of complaints that players have, like the female character not being as fleshed out, or the restrictiveness on character builds, and the romances being incredibly jarring. Compare that to Cyberpunk, where I was on the edge of my seat as we watch V go through the pain of having to watch their best friend die, find comfort with Judy, reconcile with Johnny, rock out with Carrie, and be forced to choose between Somi and Reed. And the overall journey of balancing finding a cure to the relic, while also being influenced by Johnny's vendetta, is a story that can only be told with the character of V. And with the recent updates, it's even easier to get invested in the character of V in Night City, with being able to purchase new apartments, have drinks at bars, and go on dates with your partners. Now, some say that it's not realistic that you would have all these options if your character is on a time limit to save themselves from a fatal head wound, and that the quote-unquote time limit is non-existent because you can spend your time doing side quests, gigs, without any risk to the story. And yeah, I agree. But to me, that's just the nature of a lot of RPGs in general, where there is an artificial time limit to push the story, when in reality, you have all the time you need to complete the content in the game. The only game that's been able to do the time mechanic right is like Dead Rising. But anyway, V is a more fleshed out and engaging character to play as and step into the shoes of. They are able to have a history and a presence in the world while also allowing the player to influence their decisions, compared to the Sole Survivor that lacks almost all of that. These two characters are very similar to each other. They both have backgrounds in the main setting of the game, both have connections to the main antagonist, and both are characters the developers and story gives to the player. The difference is, one finds a balance, the other stumbles. One is essential to the story, the other could be replaced. One can be molded by the player, the other is set in stone no matter what. And yet, despite everything, I still recommend both of these games. Even with the many problems I have with Fallout 4, it's still a Fallout game, and I'm a Fallout fan. And honestly, if you go into this game to play as the character that Bethesda wants you to play, it's a lot of fun. You can play up the whole traumatized war vet to sell the environment you're in. A lot of creatives have made some really cool stuff with this game, and at the end of the day, I got to level 50 in this session. I gave Todd my time and money. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that means so much to me. I never get tired of the world, the city, the characters. It leaves me wanting more. From the game itself, the tabletop roots, edge runners, all of it is just captivating to me. It's the reason why I made that video 2 years ago, and it's still my most viewed one on my channel, which I am eternally grateful for. At the end of the day, I'll always come back to both of these games. Except with Fallout 4, I'll come back for the gameplay. For Cyberpunk, I'll come back for the whole package.
Hold down. Oh, oh no.
So when it came to this video, I had a goal in mind. Get this video done before Comic-Con. And I actually did it, so that's pretty cool. The passion for making these videos has come back, and I feel myself getting a lot faster when it comes to actually making them, so that's always a nice thing to see. Thank you guys for watching and for your continued support. The next long-term project is bound to be a 3-parter, but it's one that I'm particularly very interested in.
I think I'll find it all somewhere between the ice and fire.